Greetings, this is Francesco, and I am thrilled to be here with Jill James, who's joining us for our expert uh, interview series. And Jill is the founder and CEO of SIF Industries, and she works with creative CEOs, primarily female CEOs, and has expertise in helping creative founders uh, really move from being a founder to being a CEO, from kind of working in the business to kind of working on the business and making a transition, which, kind of, when Jill told me what she does in her firm, it really spoke to me because I, as a firm owner myself, understood very, very keenly uh, what's involved in that transition. But I also see it, regularly in the clients that we're working with, that um, there is this learning curve, and it's a steep learning curve that goes from like in being in the earliest stages of being in a business and kind of doing it all yourself and managing it all yourself and cobbling things together to kind of building systems and becoming a financial manager and just kind of like all of these skills that sort of go along with growing a company. And so, Jill, I thought maybe you could start out by just kind of like introducing yourself and telling folks, a little bit about your background and what led you to create SIF. What led you here?
Sure. Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you and, kind of share with your clients a little bit more about like what we do. It's a really personal mission for me to help more people start companies and keep those companies running, making them sustainable. So, I hope that what we'll go over today helps people understand a little bit more of that and a few good ways that they could move forward as we go into 2020. So for me, I started my business out of necessity, really. I was about to become a mom. I was working at my fifth startup, and I was in the feast and famine cycle of like, I specialize in early stage, right? So I work with people from idea. I'm really good up to about 100 employees, up to Series A, up to, 10, $15 million. And companies kind of look the same at that phase of life. So I was going through that phase of company with a few different founders over my life in startups. And I got to the last one and realized, you work 80 hours a week and you get a business off the ground with a founder and fill in all the operations and finance, HR, legal, and all the stuff in the background. And then you go to zero again and you have to find a new company. So with my background, I started off as an investment banker. And then I went to be a financial advisor for individuals and small businesses. And then I went back to business school with every intent of going back into finance. But I got a Kaufman Fellowship and I got the startup bug. And I was at the Booth School of Business, at the University of Chicago, where they have an awesome entrepreneurship program that really taught me to bring all the early stage pieces of thinking about business together. And I just kind of never wanted to go back to big companies after that. And I focused more on rounding out the background that I had on finance operations, sales, marketing, and doing all of those things. And people said it felt like I didn't have a path until I put COO in my title. And then they said, wow, you're the most qualified COO we've ever had. You've actually done all of these jobs. So, that's been kind of my path of, I enjoyed working in a variety of startups over about 7 or 8 years after business school. But really with that last one, I knew I wasn't going to be able to keep doing that as a mom and be the parent I wanted to be. And, keep the agreement of like what my husband and I wanted for our family. So almost out of necessity, right? I had a couple of friends who said, hey, I see what you do for these companies. I can't hire you full time, but like, what amount could you work with me? And they were totally okay with the fact that I was 7 months pregnant and that, it might be 5, 6, 7 hours a week. And that's how I got started. And what I saw over the last 4 years of working with companies is there's just this gap between people who have an idea and finding people who are, ready to help them execute it. Right? There's a lot of advice, but getting your hands in and helping people figure out like where are those gaps in their executive decision making and help them through what I call the awkward adolescence of their business is really not an area that most people have in their background. So I really focused in on
Um, that's amazing. I mean, that is such to me. That's such a it's such a common dilemma for early stage founders who are, again, they're kind of jack of all trades of necessity. They need to kind of run lean, but at the same time, uh, without the kind of leverage of additional help, additional insight, additional expertise, it can be really hard to get from point A to point B, right? So, so what is when you come in to a company, um, and and what are the kind of most common challenges that you're seeing in terms of what
that.
transitions, what growth a founder needs uh, to undertake to get from where they are to where they're wanting to be.
Yeah, most founders started their company because they had a vision of something that they thought they could do better, or a dream that they had. And they start with like the one thing, right? When you start your company, there's one thing. Do I want to build this thing, or I have this, these people who will become my clients? And so the first thing is like, I just need to do the first thing, right? And then I call it, oops, I started a business, right? Because you just wanted to do the thing, and then you find out there's all this other stuff you had to do, right,
Right.
in order to run the business. I've thought of having a podcast called Oops, I Started a Business. Because sometimes it feels that way, right? You just are like, I'll go on my own. I'll start this. It feels like a thing I could do. But then you get into it and you're like, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know. There are all these other questions and there are these administrative requirements and I need to hire somebody. And, now I went from this one decision or one or two decisions I had to make about like, how am I going to make money? Do I have any customers? Is this thing viable? To I have like 8 questions. I can only really address 2 of them. And you're still doing the job, right? You're still your main employee, plus you're trying to run the company. So the split that I see in this is either people try to take on those other 6 questions where they don't have a lot of background and it becomes 80% of what they do. And they're trying to do the operations, finance, administrative stuff. And the thing they're good at, right? The sales, the customer relationship, the building, that gets neglected. And they feel like, do I really want to keep doing this? I hate this part of the business. I don't want to do it, right? But I don't see another way. I feel like I just have to. And so that's one piece of it. The other is that you just don't do it, right? I'm good at these 2 pieces of the business. I'm just going to pretend that those other 6 are not there.
Right.
And let's see how long I can get away with that. Because as long as I'm making money, that's okay. So I sort of see those 2 paths, right? And either way, there's a point where you run up against, as a creative founder, the limit of either you've done everything you know how to do, right? And you're still working really hard and you just feel like you're stretched, right? It's at the end. And so the things that I see there often with companies is, one is often, especially with creative founders, they really just blanch at the idea of accounting and knowing anything about accounting and having to deal with accounting, right? And the numbers are critical to making your business easier, right? So I encourage people to think of accounting as a language, not as math or as spreadsheets or as numbers. It's just a language that tells us a story about your business. So that's part of what I try to do is demystify accounting for people so that they can become net users, right? Like I couldn't, move to Spain and not learn Spanish. And so you're starting a business, you have to know something about accounting. But you don't have to become an accountant. You don't have to be super good at it. You just have to know kind of the basics and what to ask and what you're looking for. So that's one big transition because, I know that just like that hurts the hearts of many creative founders that like there may be a conversation about accounting and it's coming, but think of it as a language, then it becomes more interesting. And you can actually be very creative once you kind of know what you're doing. But I do understand like why it just feels like, oh, I just don't want to do that. Another piece of it is most of the time founders don't know things about unit costs or the economics of their business. And another area where once they know, and have an understanding of it, it almost becomes like a game and a strategy, right? But initially, they look at it as economics, as like, number detail, and that can become really overwhelming. So I think those two pieces are two big ones, and then the other is to really sit down and think about, like, are you an employee or are you an owner? And like, how are you going to balance out those roles? Because just being a business owner, 40% of your time is going to go to running the business. So, is there a way that you can get some extra help? Can we automate things? Can we streamline things? Like, if you like to do it, great. Let's just, make it a lighter amount of your work so that you can focus on the other things. If you don't like to do it, there are lots of ways we can streamline what you're doing to make it easier. And that working with someone who knows kind of those answers for you, and can take that 80% and put it back into 20%, then that frees you up to be creative again.
Yeah, so what are the the points of, I mean, it's obvious, right, that I'm thinking that a lot of entrepreneurs will hear what you just said and would be like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. I totally need all of that, but I just can't afford it. Or like, that would be great, but how do I pay for it? Or
Mm-hmm.
is that a kind of resistance piece that you get pretty commonly?
It is. The balance that I look at, and I know you work with a lot of co-founder dynamics. Like personally, my accountant says like any more than two people in an enterprise and it's doomed to fail. Right? That was the only business advice my accountant ever gave me. He's like, I'll give you a pass on getting married, but if you take on business partners, we're going to have a talk. So when I think about business in that way, you can. A lot of people think I'll just solve this by adding a co-founder, right? And I've been that other person, and it has to be, I respect what you do, you respect what I do, not I'm the visionary and you're the implementer, right? Because the business can't exist without both of you. So one of the things that I look at is taking on a co-founder. There's equity to be given up, there's another salary, everything else. When you look at it from that perspective, if you could just hire someone who was really good at it and not give up any equity, it saves you a lot of money. It's a little pain in the short term, but if you can get set up and kind of figure these things out and get some coaching on it and know what you need to know to ask good questions, often I find that, I work with a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm really considering a co-founder. And it's really just they want somebody else to do the work and they don't think they can pay for it.
Right.
And it turns out that it's a lot less than they think it's going to be, more because, there are just some common problems that they're having that feel super overwhelming and like they're going to take forever to solve, that take me not long, a few weeks, right? And so some of it is systems implementation, and they can do some of the work, right? But it's just having someone else shortcut, thinking through what the right solutions are and giving you a critical path. And often having you execute on it, because I often see that like you're just bogged down by the choices and you just don't want to have to go through them. So if somebody can say, these are the three things that are causing your most acute problems, and here are options to solve them based on what you've told me about your business. And if you want, I'll help you solve them, or I can just give you the tools and you can implement them. So, when you think about it that way, if you can take out some of the roadblocks, because, you have to, if you don't know where to start, right, it feels like it's going to take forever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if someone can say, this is a company that does that, or this is a piece of software that costs $29 a month that solves your problem,
Right.
right? Yeah. $29 software is not a co-founder. So, sometimes you just don't know because you don't come from that background. So there are a lot of solutions out there to take those pain points away. To me, it's the investment in a shortcut, right? If we can accelerate getting you back to what you love to do and growing your business, like you have to think of it as an investment. And so that is the separation that I see with a lot of companies that I've worked with or not worked with, right? Those that see, I'm going to make an investment because it's going to shorten the amount of time that I need to spend on this and move me over here, they do really well. The folks that are like, that's expensive, I can't pay for that, they stay in the same place.
Yeah. I mean, the investment piece, I think, it's sort of a key part, I think, of that transition from founder to CEO, and like getting that investments um, are made are things that you make in advance in order to realize returns in the future.
Right.
It's kind of a big shift.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's yeah, that changing from like how much does it cost to what kind of value do I get?
yeah,
And that's a big CEO balance, right? You still have to balance your budget, right? Can I make this work, but how do I make it work? But this value that I'll get from it, like that makes sense for me. So
yeah.
that is a big shift in mindset.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. What are the other kind of like big sort of shifts in mindsets that you think kind of are necessary in this transition in your
Yep.
experience?
Yep. Well, most founders at some point were an employee, right? And they, went through school, which is designed to encourage us to be employees. And then they went into a corporation, which encourages us to be employees. And they have a set of reward structures in their head that they need to break. So
Mm.
you almost certainly think like an employee when you start your business, and you are your business's number one employee. There are a lot of things you don't get rewarded for. You don't get rewarded for sitting through meetings, which you used to as an employee. You don't get rewarded for passing the day. You don't get rewarded for applying more time to something, right? So, it takes a little while. And I went through this too of like, I was sitting one day and doing some busy work, and I was like, this isn't ever going to make me any money or pay off. I felt like I should do it because it's a thing you're supposed to do, but it served literally no purpose for my business. And I was spending 3 hours a month on it. And I was like, I can just stop doing it because there's no reason, right? And that's 3 hours a month I can do on, spend on something else. And so the more that I went through things with that eye of like, what is this doing for me? Does it bring value to my business? Does it make me a better CEO? Right? Do I really have to do this? There's a whole bunch of stuff that you're doing you don't have to do, right? You just don't, right? If you say your meeting should be 20 minutes, make it 20 minutes, enforce the 20 minutes. You say you want to work 4 days a week, make it so you can work 4 days a week and stick to that boundary, right? So what there isn't a reward for just working hard. And I think that's kind of the hard part, right? Someone asked me last week what was the worst business advice I ever got. And it was just put your head down and work hard and good things will happen, right? That's I've put my head down and worked hard in a lot of scenarios. And unless you raise your hand and tell people what you're doing and show them the hard work, right? And show them the path of where you want to go, you're leaving it to somebody else to solve that for you. So I think that's, a lot of times entrepreneurs are like, if I just put my head down and work harder, this will work itself out. And if you're lucky, it does. But most of the time you have to put your head back up and be like, how am I going to find an unfair advantage against the way everybody else does it? And so thinking about those unfair advantages that you have, like what can you do? You can't work like everybody else. So I'm a big fan of the movie Moneyball, right? When he says like, if we play like the Yankees in here, will you lose to the Yankees out there, right? You don't have the money that other people have. You don't have employees. So what's going to be your unfair advantage that you can really focus in on and get that first niche in your business where you own that customer, they love you, they're fans, they want to tell everybody about it, right? That's really your focus. Not everybody, not you have to balance your long-term vision with what's the first thing that you need to do to get those crazy rabid fans who can't live without
That's real interesting. So it's not just like the grind of hard work. It's sort of uh, it's the right work, really.
you. Yes, yes, yeah. I think it's cutting out. You have to be really ruthless with looking at your time and cutting out things that maybe socially make people uncomfortable, right? I have a lot of people who are like, oh, let's meet. And I'm like, I don't meet people in person. Because if I meet someone in person in LA, right, that's two other clients I can't work with. And when I put it to people that way, of like, I could meet with 3 people or I could meet with you, and my mission is to help as many people as possible, right? So, you can come meet with me here, but I'm not going to come to you,
Right.
right? So, and that's just, it feels weird. It feels weird to people. But, when you kind of say it in those terms, then they're like, right, that makes a lot of sense. Entrepreneurs of like, you feel like you have to go to every networking conference, every networking opportunity, every happy hour,
Right.
right? And unless you have a mission for why you're there, who you want to meet, what you're doing with it, like sometimes it's better to just go home and go to sleep,
Right.
be well rested.
So 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 the kind of shifting from the employee to owner mindset is one big shift you see. Are there
Mhm.
other significant shifts that you notice?
Um, I think another is deciding, when you're going to get employees and what kind of employees, what kind of, leader you want to be. Um, there's a lot of theoretical thinking there about like what that'll be like until it actually becomes the moment that you have to hire someone and you find out like all the implications of that. Um, but for most businesses, you're not going to be able to grow without people, whether they're consultants, or in-house, part-time, full-time. So it's a shift of, yes, initially, like you could probably do it faster yourself, right? And understanding that that other person doesn't own the company, right? So they're never going to have the same urgency and the same understanding as you, right? So balancing out like what's realistic, like a person can be passionate and believe in your mission and everything else, but you're still the CEO,
Mhm.
right? So ultimately, like you're there to make the hard decisions. You're not there to put those back on your employees. They don't have the information that you have to help you with that. So sometimes it feels like when you've been alone for a while and you bring in employees, like like yay, we're all in this together, but you're kind of not, right? So the transition of like how do you balance the work environment that you want and like giving people kind of the runway to work in the way that you want your company to operate, but also always keeping in mind like there are decisions that you have to make as the CEO that you know just they're only on you.
Yeah, that's a mix. I mean, and in my experience, at least, that can go. There's a lot of trial and error associated with that. I mean, that's been my experience as well. Is that
Hmm.
I mean, I guess there's trial and error with all of this stuff, but ideally there'd be less error and more kind of bullseyes with a partnership with you. What do your engagements look like? Like when you work with a client,
Hmm.
how much time do you spend with them, and how hands-on is it versus sort of hands-off and advisory?
Sure. I think my clients have told me that at first they're always surprised at how in depth I go on their business. So I start with nearly everyone by doing a strategic plan, where I look at your financials, we go through your unit economics, we figure out like what's it going to cost to get to your goals, how much do you want to pay yourself. For some entrepreneurs, there's some personal business design in there about what they personally want in terms of ownership structure, like what they'd like to be able to do for personal wealth. That's where my financial planning background comes in, right? Because there are always questions that we can ask about like designing the business for what you want for yourself as well as what you want for growth and for the future and what makes sense. So we go through a strategic planning process where I look at what are your offerings, what are your financials. We talk through your vision for the business over the next 3 to 5 years. We talk about what the next year looks like, and then we start to put that into a pro forma. So that for folks that have been a little further along in business, it's basically your income statement, right? But going through all the elements of like where do you make money, how many units do we have to make, how much do you make from those units, how many costs do you have in overhead, how big would you have to get in order to reach the goals that you want to have. And so once we lay that out, we can often talk about scenarios of, well, I thought it would be more like this, or that feels super aggressive. I don't know if I can do that, or I think I need more employees, right? But we get to a sense of, without me saying all the accounting and finance words, I just ask you questions, right? So I ask you a lot of questions about your vision and how you want to run the business. And then I give you some guidance about like what's the high, middle, and low, about like this would be an aggressive number, this would be a conservative number. Hey, you don't have any insurance in here, right? Things like that. Kind of the things of like you can make a decision along the way, but telling you all the things for a sustainable growth business. Like these are things that you need to think about having, and do you want them now or later or never, right? You can make those choices. But when we get through that process, we typically have at the
What if people
end. Mhm.
But if like people just don't have their books in order at that time, I mean, I guess step number one would be helping them with that process and setting up their books.
Yeah. Step number one would be and I have in every area, groups of different advisors that I work with. So depending on what size they are, what their needs are, what kind of business they're in, getting their books cleaned up, right? I can't work without data. So, if your books aren't in order, we don't have something, um, I typically can't do strategic planning for you if there isn't something written down about where your money went and how much money you're making, right? Because there isn't a starting point. It's hard to answer those questions if there's not something objective for me to look at.
Right.
Yeah. So we come out of this. It's 3 sessions, typically about 2 hours each. I just ask you normal person questions, and then we translate them into what that would look like in a financial document. And we come out of it with 3 to 5 goals for the coming year and a 3-month critical path of activities to get you started, of things that you need to do now in order to reach those goals. And then for some clients, they take that and they feel ready to run with it and they go with it. Others, we stay on and do either weekly, monthly, or quarterly coaching. On a weekly basis, I'm really, a partner in your business. I'm an executive partner. We meet weekly. We go over what's going on, help you filter through the signal and the noise of this is something you don't need to work on. This is something you do. Here are decision paths. Here are resources. Monthly, we do that. We take questions kind of as they come up during the month, but we sit down once a month for like 90 minutes, go over how are you performing to plan, like what's coming up next, what's on your critical path this month, what's performing to goal, what isn't. Just those good disciplines to get in with an MBR. And if it's quarterly, it's more like a quarterly business review, QBR. Do the same thing, look at plan to actual and talk about like what went right, what didn't go right, what do we need to correct, how are we doing on those goals, but really just moving things along so that you have someone to check in with and that you can ask those questions when maybe you don't want to ask Dr. Google.
Yeah, phenomenal. I could see how that would just be, particularly for solo founders who are kind of like locked in their heads and don't have like a lot of great thought partnership. I could just see how that would be absolutely invaluable to be able to kind of hash out ideas, develop plans, and then check in on them and on what's gone well and what's not going so well, and course corrections and adjustments along the way. It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun for me. It's fun for me to be able, like I said, at an earlier stage, businesses look very similar, right? So they're whether you have inventory, don't have inventory, or your software, not software, how much scalability you have, but a lot of the questions are the same. And it's interesting for me to see how different founders kind of adapt and their process in terms of learning skills, how open they are to be like fail quickly and move on, right? And kind of figure out what's this going to be. That everyone has to go through this phase, right, of getting past it. And so to me, it's just like, can we guide you through it to the other side, make you a stronger business, and get you to the point where if you have a scale opportunity, then you're ready to scale. If it's a growth opportunity where you're going to be more organic and steadily growing, like how do we support you in that? Because there's still, a lot of options for you, but it's a different type of decision path.
And you work with both models.
Yes. I primarily work with companies that are self-funded or bootstrapped. There are a lot more day-to-day decisions in that kind of business.
Right.
We can't just solve with, I have capital, I can just put it over here, right? I can just hire somebody else, right? We always have to make a choice of what we do with that incremental dollar in a bootstrap business. So I do work more on that end because I find there are so many resources for people who've taken venture funding. They tend to have a board, they have accelerators they can work with, there are mentoring programs, right? If you don't intend to go through rapid growth, then there aren't a lot of resources for you, right? So I focus on doing a lot of the same things that you would do if you, say, had chosen to go through an accelerator, or things that you might learn in like an entrepreneurial development program, but are not going after venture capital.
Yeah, good to know. It makes a lot of sense, particularly as with the availability of resources.
Mhm.
Well, good, Jill. This was really enlightening and just a very kind of your clarity around what these kinds of early stage companies, what they're up against, and kind of what they need to navigate it is really it really just shines through. And it's just really it was really helpful to hear you describe it and also how you help. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I love talking about this. So I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it shows. It shows. Thanks so much for being here, Jill, and we'll talk
Thank
soon. All
you.
right, take care.